I will ask. Great, awesome, welcome. So I will turn this over to Elizabeth Foster-Nolan, Board President.
Thank you,
Elizabeth?
Jen. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Greetings. Great to see so many friendly faces on Zoom. And as Jen said, welcome to part 2 of our March town hall meeting, which is legislative priorities for 2023 and 2024. A lot of work has been going into this beginning in January, and Jen and her team have been closely watching everything and following what's going on and deciding what the priorities need to be for these next 2 years. So I'm going to pass this right back to Jen because there's a lot of great information that they will be sharing with us tonight. And I want to thank Jen and the Legislative Action Committee for all the work they are doing on this and will continue to do throughout the legislative session. Thank you, Jen.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen to share the slides. Thumbs up for slides? Yes. Great, awesome. Great. So good evening. Welcome everyone to Town Hall Part 2, supported legislation for 23-24. My name's Jen Miroff. I'm the chair of the Legislative Action Committee, and on behalf of our 22 specialists, one amazing team, we want to welcome you to tonight's event. So thanks for joining us, and we will record the event, as you know, and share it out tomorrow along with the slides. So you may wish to select speaker view versus gallery view, and we're going to try to spotlight each specialist as they discuss their bills. So we hope you enjoyed part 1, how the Massachusetts legislature works, featuring State Senator Liz Miranda, and that's available on our YouTube channel. So Lily, if you're able to drop that link to part 1 in the chat for folks, that would be awesome. So our goals for tonight are twofold. We want to offer you an overview of the Legislative Action Committee, and we want to spotlight 12 bills out of the 85 sets of bills. So there's usually House and Senate versions of each one of the bills that we follow. We followed 170 bills last session. And this is a lot of material. It's a lot of material. And we will offer deep dives on specific areas and bills later this spring and summer. And those events are called Meet the Specialists. So we'll go into much more detail on specific topics during those events. We'd like to ask you to save your Q&A until the end, and you can enter your questions in the chat. And if we don't get to your question, don't worry, we will absolutely follow up with you in the next couple of days. And you can always send questions to specialists@lwvma.org. And Lily, can I ask you to make sure that Franny gets back in if there's still a waiting room?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Great. So to share our community norms, be respectful, assume positive intent, but understand impact. Bring your full self and limit distractions. Use the chat feature to ask questions, and message staff with any private comments or concerns. So our agenda tonight, we're going to talk about the LAC and what it does. We're going to talk about the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts 23-24 supported opposed legislation website. We're going to spotlight 12 bills in different topic areas. We're going to talk about how you can take action, our Day on the Hill, which is our lobby day at the State House, and we'll offer you some contact information and resources, and then have some questions. So who's the Legislative Action Committee and what do we do? So there are 22 amazing, phenomenal volunteer specialists who drive our advocacy work, and they select and monitor about 150 bills. It was 170 last session, but about 150 in 20 broad areas for each of the 2-year legislative sessions. And we submit written testimony and or present oral testimony during committee hearings. And we suggest advocacy actions at local leagues and members, and we organize educational events. We're guided by the league's program priorities set by convention. And how do we select bills? So the very first question is, does the league League of Massachusetts or League of Women Voters of the US have a position to support or oppose the bill? So number one is always, do we have a position to support it? And does it offer broad policy implications across the whole Commonwealth? Does it have strong support from coalition partners, for example, the VOTES Act or the Voting Access Act, which we'll talk about tonight, with the Election Modernization Coalition, or something like Common Start, which was one of our priorities last session? And what's the likelihood of passage? Can we get it across the finish line? So how many co-sponsors does it have? Was it favorably reported out of joint committee last session, and so forth? So that's sort of the macro 50,000 foot view of, why we look at specific bills to support. So these are our position statements. So the League of the US, League of Women Voters of the US, is called Impact on Issues. And there's a brand new version of this shared by the Action newsletter and on their website for 22-24. And also where we stand is the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts position statement. And both can be found on our advocacy website. And here is our new webpage, thanks to Bryn. And Lily, do you mind just dropping that link into the chat? So from LWVMA.org website, if you go on the right-hand side, where there's a drop-down menu, you can just click advocacy, and the link will pop up for this webpage. And you can also click to it in the link that Lily shared in the chat, but here it is. So what you can do is you can scroll down, it's alphabetical order, and you can scroll down by topic area and see the bills that are listed. So there's a lot of notes here, so important notes. Bills will continue to be evaluated by the Legislative Action Committee through May, especially in the areas of climate emergency, criminal legal system, and then, of course, we have about a priority 3 to 4 bills that we select as top priorities closer to our day on the Hill, our lobby day in October. But again, this is not a permanent fixture. We will continue to evaluate bills throughout the session. If something comes up, for example, we know there'll be an omnibus, a very comprehensive firearms bill coming through. And so that wouldn't be on the list yet because it hasn't even been filed. So things do come up during the session. So again, listed in alphabetical order by topic area. And a reminder, bill numbers do change throughout the legislative process, which can be, we don't want you to pull your hair out about this. It can get a little tricky. So your best bet is to just copy and paste the title of the bill into the search bar at malegislature.gov, which I'll show you right here. And the bill numbers do change. So just check the bill history tab. And another very important note is that if we supported a bill last session and it's been refiled and it didn't pass last session and it has been refiled by the lead sponsors, we continue to support that bill. The support doesn't go away just because the session ended and it didn't pass. Okay, and here's malegislature.gov. A little bit of a cloudy sky there, hopefully sunny soon. And now what I'm going to do is turn it over to our elections legislative specialist. She partners with Nancy Brumbach, and her name is Nell Forgas. So Nell, let me see if I can spotlight you now. And if not, if everyone can turn to speaker view. I'll wait for everyone. It'll remove all the pins. So maybe just everyone can select speaker view. Thanks, Nell.
Great. Thanks so much. So as Jen said, I'm Nell Forgas. I'm a new legislative co-specialist for elections and voting this year. I'm going to talk to you tonight about the Voting Access Act, which builds on the election modernizations that the League supported in last year's VOTES Act. There are 4 key provisions: the same-day registration, decoupling voter registration from the municipal census, uniform mail and absentee voting forms and ballots, and strengthening oversight of accessible polling locations. These bills are a continuation of our efforts to make voting in Massachusetts more accessible and more equitable. The bill, as you will note in the slide, is filed in the Senate as a single bill by Senator Cream as Bill S-410. It is filed in the House as 4 separate bills. The language in the bills is the same in the House and the Senate versions. It just was filed separately as 4 separate bills, one for each provision in the House. And you can see the bill numbers there on the slide. You may recognize same-day voter registration from last year's Votes Act. This provision was in the original bill that was filed, but was removed from the bill before it was passed. Same-day registration provides important protections for voters to ensure that they can cast their vote. It allows all eligible voters to register or update their registration in person on election day and on early voting days. SDR is mostly used by voters who need to update their voter registration or who would otherwise be excluded from participating on election day. It is used currently in 22 states. Notably, Maine, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and New Hampshire have used it for decades. The League supports this because obviously we believe that no eligible voter should be turned away at the polls due to an error or an out-of-date voter registration. So this would allow voters to correct any errors and exercise their right to vote when they're ready to vote. The second provision we're going to talk about is decoupling voter registration from the municipal census. All states are required under federal law to have a process for keeping voting rolls up to date. Massachusetts is one of the few states to punish voters whose household fails to fill out the municipal census by placing them on the inactive voter list. With this bill, not responding to the municipal census would no longer result in being dropped from the voting register. So what this would do is instead, voters' names would go on the inactive list if information that they have moved from their city or town is received from either the U.S. Postal Service's National Change of Address program or from the Multi-State Electronic Registration Information Center, also known as ERIC, or from official notice by another jurisdiction. Voters' names will remain on the inactive list, allowing them to vote on a regular ballot if they affirm continued residence in their city and town until they fail to vote or take another voting-related action after 2 consecutive state general elections, including 1 presidential election. The third provision is to combine the mail voting forms. This requires uniform mail voting applications, instructions, ballot styles, envelopes, and other papers and electronic documents without distinguishing separate forms for early voting by mail and absentee voting. Allowing these forms to be uniform would reduce the cost and the workload for local election officials and also reduce confusion for voters. The last provision is to enforce voting accessibility. This requires the Secretary of State to arrange inspection of all polling places and early voting sites at least once every 4 years to ensure compliance with federal and state disability accessibility laws and to report on progress annually. Cities and towns not in compliance must take immediate action to comply and file a compliance plan, and the Attorney General can enforce compliance in court. Every year, voters with disabilities do encounter various barriers to voting on election day, including automatic doors that don't work, automark machines that aren't set up, inadequate signage, and more. So this annual reporting would ensure accountability, accuracy, and further the public's trust in election administration.
Great, thank you, Nell. Thank you for presenting our centerpiece voting rights bill this session. That's amazing. And now we will turn it over to Nancy Brumbach to talk about the hybrid meeting bill.
Thanks, Jen. I think many of you have heard about this bill already, but it is an act to modernize participation in public meetings. It proposes that eventually all public meetings that are subject to the open meeting law will use a hybrid meeting format. That is a combination of in-person meetings with the ability to access and participate in meetings remotely. First, a quick note, this law that we're discussing does not apply to annual town meetings, either representative town meetings or open town meetings. Town meeting is governed by a different set of laws than the open meeting law. This bill applies to meetings that are covered by the open meeting law. So nobody get panicked that you're going to have remote voting at town meeting. At the beginning of the COVID crisis in March 2020, the governor's state of emergency declaration suspended the provisions of the open meeting law, which had required in-person meetings. And municipalities adopted new platforms and technology to create remote-only meeting options. Those emergency provisions were first scheduled to expire June 15th, 2021. Then that was extended to July 15th, 2022. And another extension was granted, excuse me, last summer that was set to expire March 31st, 2023, 2 days from now. If the provisions were to expire, all open meeting law public meetings would have to go back to only an in-person format because there is no provision for remote meetings in the law itself. The Senate and House are now in the middle of considering a supplemental budget that includes a provision to allow remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies subject to the open meeting law, another extension through March 31st, wait for it, 2025. In other words, the legislature is buying itself 2 more years to deal with this issue. We and the other members of the coalition we work with on this, which include the ACLU, Common Cause, MassPIRG, the Disability Law Center, the Newspaper Publishers Association, and New England First Amendment Coalition. We hope the legislature is not going to put this off for another 2 years. Towns need to know where they stand and to begin to add the technology they need to implement this. And this bill would phase in hybrid meetings, first prioritizing state agencies and elected municipal bodies like select board and school committee. It requires universal compliance by 2030. In the meantime, it would allow municipalities to seek economic hardship waivers for non-elected bodies unable to provide hybrid meetings. The default positions for municipal bodies that can't do a hybrid is first remote meetings with only in-person only meetings as a last resort. Finally, the bill creates a trust fund to administer a grant program to help municipalities finance their modernization efforts. The legislature is working on a $30 billion bond authorization to support this effort. So there will be money to do this. This is not an unfunded mandate. And I don't think people are willing to go back to not having a remote access to meetings. There isn't much concrete data on what remote access meant to meeting attendance during the pandemic, but it's generally understood that way more people virtually attended these meetings and got involved in their local government. The remote option means people can attend meetings who were not able to do so in the past. People like seniors who no longer drive at night, or persons with disabilities that make it difficult to attend meetings in person, or parents with small kids who want to know what their school committee is doing, and everyone else that just wants to keep an eye on their local government. I personally think there's another important reason for hybrid options going forward. More and more towns have seen their town newspaper converted to an online and regional format with little or no coverage of local government, not even select board, city council, or school committee, much less bodies like planning board and park and recs or the library board. It is critical, therefore, that residents have an option to watch town government meetings for themselves and participate in those meetings. This bill is important, and I'm going to be asking all the local leagues in the next, there's a thing coming out in the Action newsletter, there's a template for a statement from each local league that the local leagues support this, because this is a very local bill. This affects your local government. And so I think not only the state league, but it'd be good to have the local leagues on the record supporting this. So keep an eye out for that notice. It'll be in the Action newsletter, and I'm going to do a Google group request as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. That's so important. Okay. Carolyn Lee is our natural resources specialist and was unable to be here. So I'm going to share this information about PFAS bill. It's a PFAS omnibus. I have difficulty pronouncing it, but it is well known as PFAS or forever chemicals. This is an omnibus bill. We followed a number of PFAS bills last session, and now they're rolled into one massive bill. So they're pernicious and persistent chemicals of the 21st century, and they're proven to cause all types of cancer, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, an array of developmental and neurological diseases. And this bill would ban the manufacture of or import into Massachusetts of any of these chemicals, PFAS or PFOAS. And so this would implement the recommendations of the 2022 PFAS Interagency Task Force. And again, there were 14 bills filed on this. So this is one massive omnibus. And to just let you know more about PFAS, the European Union has filed similar legislation and Maine has passed similar legislation. So state and federal firefighters are currently suing to get PFAS out of their gear. I know that was a hot topic a couple of sessions ago. And also Major League Baseball teams are suing because the players are getting glioblastoma. It's related to PFAS, which is found in artificial turf. So this is a massive, massive crisis. And so Carolyn, if you have questions, please contact Carolyn Lee, clee@lwvma.org, or the specialist email, but this is like mission critical. So thanks to Carolyn for her work on this. Okay. And now we'll turn it over to Affordable Housing Co-Specialist, Lori Stewart. Lori?
Hi, my name is Lori Stewart. I'm from the League of Women Voters Salem chapter. And tonight I'll be talking about why we need access to counsel. And I should mention I guess I'm now the senior affordable housing specialist because Claire Gordon is sort of retired and we have a new housing specialist, Lucy Kennedy, who's just getting started with us. But why we need the access to counsel bill. This bill was carried over from last session. The league decided to support it last session and obviously we're going to continue to support it. But we have 1 in 4 kids living in poverty, who live in poverty, who face eviction by the age of 15. Access to counsel is something that specifically hits women very hard and people of color more disproportionately than other groups. Mothers, especially single mothers and mothers of color, are being evicted far more frequently than others. 9 out of 10 tenants facing eviction are unrepresented. If you take a quick look at the image on the slide, it shows that for 2022, 11.5% of tenants were represented in housing court, as opposed to 86.6% of landlords who had representation. So the playing field is not even. Next slide, please. The lead sponsors of this are Senator DiDomenico and Representative David Rogers and Representative Mike Day. We have 53 co-sponsors right now, and we are looking for more. So if this bill appeals to you and you see the justice and getting an even playing field for tenants and evictions, please contact your state rep and state senator to ask them to co-sponsor. Additionally, there are over 230 organizations that support this bill. Significantly, there are property owners, landlords, tenant associations, the ACLU of Massachusetts, several different NAACP chapters, cities and towns are supporting it. It's a big coalition and the movement is growing. So if you're interested, please contact the specialist email and I can give you more information. And there'll be plenty of updates about this bill as it moves forward in the action newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. That is a powerful graphic. Glad you shared. Okay. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Women's Issues Specialist, Jan Soma.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone. We have a number of bills involving women's issues, but the one I'll be highlighting this evening focuses on equal pay for women, and it's called the Act Relative to Pay Range Disclosure. It would require employers to give salary ranges for every job advertisement or posting. It would require them to disclose pay ranges for employees being considered for promotions or transfers, and it would require disclosure of the pay range of a current job holder's position upon request. Massachusetts has the best equal pay legislation in the country. This type of legislation was first passed in the 1920s. Most recently, updated comprehensive equal pay legislation went into effect in 2018. Yet our pay disparities in Massachusetts are similar to those across the country and are not improving. So there's more work to be done. The latest data from the 2021 wage gap study conducted by the Boston Women's Workforce Council shows that the disparity in wages for women compared to men in our area is getting worse, not better. This data was from 250 companies that actually are disclosing anonymously their pay ranges as part of a group of companies who say they would like to help women get better wages, and they're getting worse. So you know this is a really problem that is hard to fix. Women earn 70 cents on the dollar compared to men in this most recent study. The gap widens to 65 cents on the dollar when performance pay is included. Brown and Black women suffer the largest wage gaps. Unfairly lower wages means that more women than men are in poverty at all ages. The bill I'm presenting would help women negotiate fairer salaries. Our 2018 equal pay legislation forbade employers from asking about an applicant's salary at their previous job. Since women usually make less than their male counterparts, the employers use this knowledge to perpetuate lower salaries. After employers were not allowed to ask about previous salaries, they began asking female applicants about how much they would like to make. Without pay range data, women often stated a salary that was lower than males, resulting in a lower salary. Here's an example from an employment consultant I know. An employer asked her client how much she would like for a salary. She made $90,000 at her previous job, so she was thinking of asking for $100,000 for a salary. The consultant told her not to answer the question. She was asked 3 times, but took her consultant's advice and didn't give an answer. She was finally offered $145,000. This is a woman who was able to have a consultant. And as you know, most women are not able to do that. An act relative to pay range disclosures will help level the paying field for women by helping them know what pay is reasonable for a position they're applying to fill. As you know, bills pass only if they have a lot of support. The Wage Equity Now Coalition, which is a coalition involving at least 90 organizations. So the Wage Equity Now Coalition, in partnership with the Boston Foundation, is laser focused on the passage of this legislation. Currently, 63 representatives and 13 senators are sponsoring or co-sponsoring an act relative to pay range disclosure. If you would like to see if your legislators are supporting equal pay legislation in Massachusetts, you can direct message me with your contact information and the names of your legislators, and I will be happy to get back to you so you can either thank them or ask them to sign on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Awesome. Thank you for attending the Wage Equity Now Lobby Day last week. Jan was front and center. Thank you. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Palma McLaughlin to talk about the Common Start Bill. Palma?
Hi, Robin Chen is actually handling this one. It's an act to provide affordable, accessible, high quality early education and to promote child development, well-being, and support of the Commonwealth. It's a long title. It's referred to as the Common Start Bill. And what this will do is address the problem. What we found out during COVID is that childcare and teaching your children became a big issue. People first really found out about it. But the truth is this is a well-known problem that families do not have accessibility to reliable, high-quality, affordable childcare. In addition, the pay rates are very low, and there is a lot of churn in terms of providers. So we're asking for educators, but we're not paying them actually enough to become educated. What this will do is it will set up a framework that's a two-pronged framework. It will create operational funding, which will permanently establish direct to provider funding. And that will allow higher pay rates, more reliable pay rates, and that type of thing. There'll also be financial assistance directly to families. This will help with things like, as I said, employer retention. It will also allow businesses to have more reliable labor. It will reduce churn in other fields. It will allow more access to the workforce. And it will also benefit families and children because they will have access to high quality early education, which has been shown to lead to lifelong benefits, higher income, and that type of thing. Large coalition, very active. If there are any questions, they can ask me. This is actually to set up a framework.
Great, thank you, Palma. And that was one of our 4 core priorities, and we see in the news all the time, Massachusetts has some of the highest daycare and childcare costs in the nation, so thank you. Okay, our next bill, this is from specialist Pat Costello. She's our elder affairs specialist. And this is a new one for us. This is called an act relative to taxes due upon the death of active duty personnel and the elderly. The lead sponsors are Senator Cindy Friedman and Rep. Michelle Socolo. So property tax deferrals are a wonderful benefit to seniors and active military who can qualify. If the person deferring the taxes passes away without a surviving spouse, Massachusetts requires that the reasonable interest rate agreed to at the time of deferral increases dramatically to 16% upon the taxpayer's death. And it is immediate. So there's no grace period given to the heirs to settle the estate, empty the house, and sell it. So the 16% rate is a deterrent to many seniors, mostly widows or widowers, and active military who might otherwise consider deferring their taxes. So this legislation would provide a 1-year period for the heirs to settle the estate at the interest rate agreed to at the time of the deferral. And the main goal is really to keep more folks in their homes because it's just, very stressful to settle the estate quickly and pay the taxes. So questions, you can contact Pat Costello or the specialist email, and she's happy to talk to you about that. Okay, and now we'll turn it over to criminal legal system specialist, Nancy Bettinger.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to talk to you about an act related to rehabilitation, reentry, and human rights for incarcerated persons. In other words, for everyone who's in prison in Massachusetts. The goal of this bill is to shift management of correctional facilities, away from punitive approaches that we know are ineffective, and toward a system that will be more supportive of rehabilitation and reentry, and also to provide habitable living conditions in all of our correctional facilities. So the bill
Excellent.
lays out minimum standards. I think it's the next slide, Jen,
Sure.
that you had.
Great.
The list. Yeah, it lays out minimum standards for treatment of all incarcerated people. And these are just a few of them, but the bill would require better educational opportunities and training opportunities than people are now receiving. Regular access to in-person visits in prison, appropriate medical care and mental health care. And another one is 8 hours a day out of the cell for each person. So a minimum of 8 hours a day out of cell, which would effectively eliminate solitary confinement. And this is important because too many people incarcerated in Massachusetts are still subjected to isolation for long periods of time that are essentially solitary confinement, although DOC doesn't call them that, but that's an important provision. Also, the bill provides for really basic living conditions that you would wish wouldn't even have to be in a bill, like clean water, flushable toilets. I should say that there's a lot of inconsistency in how different facilities in Massachusetts are operated. Some of these correctional facilities are pretty decent, but some of them are really actually pretty awful by all accounts. And so I think this is a really important bill to make sure that everyone's treated reasonably in prison and the prisons do the job of rehabilitation that they are supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you for educating us on this. Okay, next we'll turn it over to healthcare co-specialist Valentina Pasquantonio. Val?
Thank you, Jen. Before you, you should see a cartoon. I can see it too. And as you notice, it is a cartoon depicting the United States healthcare system as it is now, with two engineers, one saying to the other, we tried every fix the insurance company allows, but it still won't fly. As I start my presentation, I would like you to take a really good look at this cartoon and see the innovative, cost-effective ways that insurance companies suggested to make the system fly. It's a marvelous cartoon, right on point. Tonight, I'm speaking about an act establishing Medicare for all in Massachusetts. Jen, can we go back to the other slide?
Oh, sure.
I'd really like
Sure.
to have them have an opportunity to take a good look at it because it's really good representation. Thank you, Jen. This is actually a single payer health care system. And we have a choice. We can get this bill passed, or we can let the healthcare system as we know it implode upon itself. The healthcare system we have now has passed the crisis stage and is now rapidly moving to implosion. Now, there's good news and bad news about this. The good news is that when the healthcare we now have does implode, we have a system already in place. That's the system in this bill that has been worked out carefully by experts and updated and is ready to go. Now I'm ready for the next slide, if you would. So this bill, nope. Yeah, there it is. Okay. This bill will reestablish healthcare as a consumer-driven, fiscally responsible entity with an independent consumer trust fund funded in a way that Massachusetts consumers will feel most comfortable and solve all the DEI healthcare issues. The bad news is that if we wait and don't do this bill now, we are guaranteed that when the system implodes, many of us in Massachusetts will either die unnecessarily, be maimed unnecessarily, be allowed only partial care, suffer unnecessary pain, and have billions of personal, premium, and tax dollars lost forever down an endless rabbit hole of inequity and greed. This bill will not pass without our dedicated work as a league. In order to solve our healthcare problems, we need to pass this bill, and we can't do it unless we do it as a league. Thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you at a specialist meeting, and we can talk about this and our other 4 bills in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. And yes, this was one of our 4 core last session, and we look forward to your Meet the Specialists event. Okay, and now we'll turn it over to Immigration Specialist Amy Cooper. Amy?
Thanks, Jen. Hi, I'm going to talk tonight about an act relative to language access and inclusion. So this bill addresses the fact that most state government services and the informational material about them are provided primarily in English. This has the effect of preventing people with limited English proficiency from accessing the key services that they need. So the bill's goal is to expand availability of state resources in languages other than English, and it plans to do this by requiring public-facing state agencies to translate and interpret information. And I should add that this includes American Sign Language as well. So this bill would break down huge barriers for people with limited English proficiency, and that it's a big number in Massachusetts. Over 850,000 people identify as limited English proficient. So really, in a nutshell, this is all about equity. It's providing equal opportunity for people with limited English proficiency to access state services. And you can see some of these are very basic things: healthcare, child welfare, food assistance, unemployment assistance, legal services, and so on. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Amy. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Children and Family Specialist, Palma McLaughlin. Palma?
Hi, this is an act to improve protections relative to domestic violence. It is to expand the domestic violence legislation to encompass what we now know about it. This is going back to the root, the league goes back to the roots of the domestic violence movement. Back when it was called wife beating, Massachusetts passed one of the first restraining order or protective order bills in the country. However, the law right now refers to physical abuse. And what we know is that it is much more than physical abuse. Coercive control, which is a pattern of behavior to take power and control over another person. We have found that it is actually a better predictor of domestic violence homicide. Between 28 and 33% of DV homicides are the first act of physical violence is the homicide. Furthermore, coercive control also precedes, in almost every case, precedes any kind of physical violence. And that includes things like tracking who you're speaking to, trying to isolate you from people, continual degradation or putting you down, threatening to take the children, demanding that you share all your passwords, going through your email, going through your phone, tracking your phone, sharing explicit pictures online without permission, limiting access to resources. If you are an immigrant, it may be threatening to report you to ICE and have you deported. And it's basically taking away a person's personal liberty. What this will do is it will expand the ability to get recognition for what a person is undergoing in the law. And the example I use is actually from my training example, and many years ago before this, and it was a case where it had been an abusive relationship, but then the physical violence stopped. But the man had put 2 bullets on the mantelpiece, and he said, "One for you, one for me." And they sat there for almost 5 years, and she would have to dust them every day. But she was not able to get a restraining order because it was not physical violence. Eventually, she actually did decide to leave the person, and they found her. He had stabbed her multiple times. That was the first act of violence in a long time. So this will actually say coercive control, abuse, and technology. This is also part of the violence. As I said, this is going back to the league has been involved in this heavily since the beginning, and it's got a great coalition. I don't know if anybody's been around for a while. Natalie Higgins actually spoke to the league at our convention, her first year in office, and she comes out of working as an attorney in the domestic violence sector. So it's a very good bill. Any questions, you can get in touch with me.
Thank you,
And I
Paula.
defended that on a downer, didn't I?
No, it's mission critical. We want to save lives and keep everyone safe. Thank you. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Transportation Specialist Franny Osmond. Franny?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if there were any special instructions at the beginning, I didn't hear them because I was having technical difficulties for the first 20 minutes. I live in an area that's part of a regional transit authority, regional transit authority, RTA. 55% of residents in Massachusetts live in RTAs. And we often are outside the core of those RTAs. If you live in the middle of an RTA, which is often a smaller city, a gateway city usually, there is fixed route. There's a lot of transportation available in there. This bill doesn't talk about that, but I wanted to mention that. I try to be a spokesperson for the towns that merely are able to offer some 8 to 3 or 9 to 3 Council on Aging vans. But in general, RTAs are the answer. What MBTA is in the core of Boston and Cambridge, RTAs are outside there. 250 plus of our 350 communities. And they often are a lifeline to people with low income, older adults, and people with disabilities. It's the only possible transit available to them. But we have not been supported outside the MBTA. The RTAs, which have 55% of the residents, only have 7% of the funding. 1.5 billion is the operating funds of the MBTA, and 94 or 96 million is for RTAs. You can switch to the next slide, please. This bill will help innovate, expand, and improve regional transit to meet community needs, including stable funding. About 2 or 3 years ago, the state said, "Oh, we'll give some money to you, and you can use it for special projects. You can compete against other RTAs to use this extra $2 million." I mean, it just hasn't been significant, the amount that it's improved. So this will increase the funding floor for RTAs, and that will support the move towards 7-day-a-week service during critical commute hours across all the 15 RTAs. It will create a dedicated fund for RTAs. It will uplift community needs through an annual RTA Council report, and it will eliminate profitability as a performance metric, which isn't fair to some of the lower income RTAs or ones where it's just more difficult or to serve the people in their area. I mean, imagine a tourist or a university town versus a rural area. So RTAs really need our attention. It needs people. I know when I was living in the MBTA region, I had no idea what an RTA is. Most people out here don't, I'm in Acton, but most people have no idea what an RTA is. And it's really important to fund them really well. So Massachusetts Public Health Association is leading the charge on this effort. And actually there's a lobby week next week, it's April 10th, that week, including a lobby day at the State House on April 10th. So if anybody wants to get involved, please go to the website and you'll be able to help support those changes. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Franny. Awesome. April 10th, RTA Lobby Day, we'll include that. Great. So we covered a lot of information. Thank you so much for listening to all that information. And now you can see the breadth of the topics that we focus on. So there are a lot of ways to take action. So we definitely encourage you to attend our upcoming, stay tuned for specific details, but attend a topic area briefing, which we'll call Meet the Specialists. You can join the Envoy program. So we'd like to have one envoy from every local league who can serve as a liaison between the legislators of the local league and the Legislative Action Committee and work on those priorities. You can become a specialist. We'd love to have you join our team. Right now, we have a position available for higher education. We really encourage you as of April 1st to follow those actions in the monthly action newsletter as things heat up in the legislative session. So right now, you'll see all these bills, all the advocacy groups are looking for official co-sponsors to sign on to legislation. And we can include that information in the April 1st action newsletter, but as things start to heat up, we'll be including more of those actions in the monthly newsletter. You can respond to action alerts, which are ramped up at key times around the hearing dates and so forth. So joint committees hold hearings for all the bills, usually in the summer, usually in quotations, so May, June, July, August. So we'll be asking for specific actions around those times. We'd love to have you invite a specialist to speak on a topic who can offer ways to take action on state issues. So if you'd want to invite one of us to speak on a topic to your local league, we're happy to do that. And you can join an issue area email group for updates. So we'd love to have you, and if you are interested in a specific topic, if you want to enter your name and email and topic area into the chat, please do so. And we'd also love, you can either email us directly at specialists@lwvma.org as well. And we talked about the envoys. Mary Cummings is our envoy coordinator, and I'll share her contact information as well and the resources. Just a reminder, we have Day on the Hill, which is our league lobby day at the State House. It's in October. The date is TBD, but we like to have it in October strategically because we want our bills to be voted out of committee favorably. So the hearings have taken place, and now it's just a couple more months before we hit the Joint Rule 10 day in February. So it's strategic in its timing that it's October. Everyone's having their lobby days now, but we like to wait and just be very strategic and take action at that time. So we'll highlight 3 to 4 top priority bills for the session, TBD, and we'll meet with legislators to discuss their support. So here's our contact information and resources. So I'm going to stop share. And if folks have questions, if they'd like to, we could take maybe, oh, it's actually so close to 8 o'clock. So maybe if we could answer just a couple of questions in the chat, and please, we are definitely going to answer all the questions. So if we don't answer them tonight, we will definitely follow up.
Jen, there was a question earlier.
Okay.
If you wanted to answer, it's from Rosemary. It says, Was the last 6 weeks of the last session of the legislature dominated by the passage of sports betting? If yes, could you please explain why?
That's a great question. We don't advocate for sports betting, so it wasn't on our radar. So I'm actually not sure of that, but I'm happy to research it and let you know if that helps. But I actually, because it wasn't one of our priorities, we didn't follow it. So
The reason I asked is because I feel like Common Start, a lot of the bills that we wanted to pass, suddenly nobody was talking to us. I mean, like on Cape Cod, because it was sports betting, and I got very, very discouraged
Right.
over that. And I just want to know if that was just my impression or that it was actually happening throughout Massachusetts.
I know I
That's all.
see it commercials every day all the time now.
No.
And thank you, Franny. She's calling out the Mass Public Health Association's Lobby Day, which is Monday, April 10th. And we can share that in the Action newsletter as well. And China, thank you so much for telling me how to pronounce PFAS.
I will tell you a lot of things that towards the end of the session, a lot of it kind of switches around to what can we get in the budget as an outside section. And some of the framework for Common Start or for Lift Our Kids was kind of slid into the budget as an outside section, because with some of these bigger bills, you begin to look at them and say, this isn't going to get through all the committees and everything like that. Let's see if there's another way to do it. So yes, sports betting got a lot of press, but there was a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I know we're just 2 minutes to 8 o'clock. So please, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Please email us with questions, specialists@lwvma.org. Thanks to everyone who presented and attended. And we'll be sure to share this video, and we'll share the slides as PDF so you can click on the links to everything in the PDF. Great. So thanks, everyone. Good night. Take care. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye, thank you.
Good to see you. Bye.